Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Lucas always believed in the power of routine. That was what he held on to when everything around him felt uncertain. He climbed mountains with precision, trained his students with dedication, and came home every day knowing that, despite everything, he and Madison had built something solid. That's what he trusted. So, at first, he missed the signs. He told himself it was just fatigue, frequent travel, or the new projects she'd been taking on. He was wrong. The first thing that bothered him wasn't anything dramatic, just a small, almost unnoticeable gesture. After returning from their last trip to San Diego, Madison started sleeping with her back to him. They always liked sleeping in each other's arms, or at least with their legs tangled together. Now, she turned away without saying goodnight. At first, Lucas just adjusted quietly, as if respecting her space. But he started wondering if it was just sleep or if he was slowly being pushed out of the bed that used to be their intimate territory. A few days later, she showed up wearing new clothes. Madison always had good taste, but she was never impulsive. Suddenly, she appeared in dresses he'd never seen, shoes that didn't match her usual practical style, and heavier makeup, even for a quick trip to the corner cafe. Lucas joked about it, asking if she'd won the lottery or was in some ad campaign. She gave a half-hearted laugh, dodging the question, and just said she needed to refresh herself every now and then. He smiled back, but sensed something hidden behind that forced lightness. The new perfume was harder to ignore. Lucas knew that scent, but not because he'd smelled it on Madison before. It reminded him of other places, other situations. The strong, sweeter fragrance filled the hallway before she even walked into the room. He brought it up once, but she answered too quickly, like she already had an excuse ready. She said it was a free sample from a coworker. And without him even asking, she added that she liked the smell and would keep using it. That stuck in his mind because Madison never wore strong perfumes. She preferred subtle ones, barely noticeable. Her schedule started stretching out. Before, she'd give him a heads-up when a meeting ran late or a client needed extra attention. Now, she sent short messages, sometimes just an emoji, to explain her delay. Lucas found himself eating dinner alone more often, pushing food around his plate while his phone stayed silent on the table. When she finally got home, she said she was exhausted and went straight to shower. She stopped asking about his day. Before, she made it a point to know how his climb went, how the students did, if he got hurt. Now, she just mentioned what she had to do the next day. The house still functioned, but it felt like a train station where two passengers shared the same bench without speaking. Lucas also noticed she started taking her phone into the bathroom, something she'd never done before. And not only that, the phone was always on silent, face down, even when they were alone. One night, while she was in the shower, the phone buzzed on the bed. Lucas glanced at it, not to read it, just to see who it was from. It was someone saved as S with a rocket emoji next to the name. When she came out of the bathroom and saw the phone near him, the mood shifted. She made some casual joke, grabbed the phone, and shoved it into her robe pocket, all with a calculated smile, like she was trying to act like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. The following week, Lucas tried to bring it up casually. He suggested a trip, maybe a weekend getaway like they used to do. Madison said she was swamped with work, her agency was expanding, and her priority right now was professional. Lucas nodded, but a knot formed in his chest. He didn't recognize her anymore. That practical, affectionate, intense woman seemed to have been replaced by a robotic version, always connected, yet distant. She was still there, but it was like she'd taken her essence somewhere else. Lucas began to feel like he was living with a carefully scripted version of Madison. She was still physically present, but there was a strange energy, like everything around her had been rehearsed. Phrases said at just the right moment, neutral expressions, forced laughs. He watched, not out of suspicion, but trying to understand what he'd missed. The hikes they used to do together were left behind. There was always an excuse. She blamed accumulated fatigue, work pressure, mandatory agency events. But he knew those hikes were never an obligation, they were an escape. And Madison always made sure to be by his side during those moments. Now, any invitation was met with the same predictable excuse. Dinner plans with friends started getting cancelled. Lucas confirmed attendance for 2 close friends' birthdays, and Madison backed out at the last minute. The excuse was always the same: last-minute meetings, delayed deliveries, sudden illness. At the gatherings he went to alone, friends asked about her with quiet curiosity, and Lucas felt uneasy making up answers he didn't even believe himself. It bothered him. Madison was never the kind of woman who disappeared socially. On the contrary, she was always involved, engaged, present. Slowly, one name started coming up more often in her conversations: Scott Whitaker. He always came up as a capable coworker, full of ideas, leading a new branding project. The odd thing was how she talked about him. Not exaggerated, but not neutral either. Her tone got slightly more animated, like she was trying to sound indifferent but couldn't hide a bit of excitement. Lucas didn't react right away, but he noted it all. She mentioned Scott even in situations where his name wasn't necessary. She said he'd come up with a creative solution for a client problem, that he was great in meetings, that he handled pressure well. During one of these talks, Lucas asked what it was like working with someone so highly praised. She answered with a rehearsed calmness that he was nice, and quickly changed the subject. That's when he started making small mental notes. Not about what she said, but how she said it. There were pauses where there used to be flow. There was too much caution where there used to be spontaneity. He started remembering old details. Madison always left her travel itinerary stuck to the fridge. It was a practical way for him to know where she'd be, her flight times, hotel info, everything transparent. On her last trip, Lucas noticed there was no paper at all. She only mentioned her destinations vaguely, said it would be quick, just a round trip. When he asked if she wanted him to drive her to the airport, she said she'd already made plans with a coworker. One day, he found a receipt from a cafe in San Diego in the pocket of one of her pants. It listed 2 coffees, 2 croissants, and a dessert. Nothing unusual, except the name on the order was written as Maddie, a nickname she'd never used with him. That kept spinning in Lucas's mind for days. Who called Madison Maddie? And why was she letting them? The receipt had a date and time that matched when she said she was in a client meeting. Madison said she was traveling to San Diego that weekend, mentioning something about an important presentation with a new client. She spoke casually, like it was just another work trip. Lucas just listened. He mentally noted the hotel name, the same one she'd mentioned before. When she left the house with her suitcase and gave him a quick kiss, Lucas didn't ask anything. He waited for the door to close, picked up his phone, and called Brian, his brother who lived in San Diego. He explained the situation straight out. Said he needed someone in San Diego that weekend to check if Madison was really where she said she was, and who she was with. Brian got the message. He promised to go on Saturday and keep it low-key. When the day came, Lucas tried to keep busy, but the minutes dragged. At 5 in the afternoon, his phone buzzed. Brian had arrived at the hotel. He said she was indeed staying there, but he wasn't sure if she was alone. Hours later, another message. Madison was in the hotel restaurant, accompanied by a tall, well-dressed man who looked familiar. Brian tried to take a photo, but the angle wasn't good. The images were blurry, distant. Still, Lucas recognized the man's face. It looked like Scott Whitaker. That would have been enough for most people, but Lucas needed more. He needed to see it with his own eyes. He made a decision right then. On Sunday morning, he left saying he had a training session with students and drove straight to San Diego. The drive was silent, tense, heavy. He parked a few blocks from the hotel and stayed watching from a distance. He didn't have a clear plan. He just waited. Around 6, he saw Madison. She came out the main entrance of the hotel, smiling. Next to her was the man from the photos. They laughed, talked, walked like they were on a casual Sunday stroll. They walked side by side naturally. Then, without hesitation, he took her hand. The gesture was simple, but to Lucas it felt like a punch. Madison's reaction confirmed everything. She smiled back warmly, like that touch was already part of their routine. Lucas stayed frozen. Blood pounded in his ears. His head spun. Every doubt vanished. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was betrayal. Clear. Out in the open. 12 years of marriage ignored in that instant. And right there, on that spot on the sidewalk, he knew what he had to do. Lucas crossed the street without hesitation. His eyes locked on Madison and Scott, who kept talking, completely absorbed in each other. As he got closer, they were still laughing, completely unaware they could be caught. Madison saw him first. Her expression changed in seconds. The smile disappeared. Scott turned right after, surprised. Lucas stopped in front of them without saying a word. The silence cut deeper than any shout. He looked at Madison, then at her hand still holding Scott's. Then he said one direct sentence, firm enough to pierce her chest. "Is this how you hold client meetings?" Madison let go of the other man's hand and tried to explain, but her words stumbled. She said she could explain, that it wasn't what it looked like. Lucas pulled his phone out and showed the screen. Photos. Videos. Proof. He showed her everything without another word. Just let her see how clear it all was, how certain he was of what he'd seen. Scott tried to step in, asked for calm, said there was no reason for drama. Lucas looked at him for 2 seconds. Then back at Madison. "You lied this whole time. You planned it all. And you still had the nerve to come home like nothing happened." Madison had no response. Words wouldn't come. Her hand trembled, her eyes darted away. The man she'd been so relaxed with now seemed distant. Lucas turned and walked away without waiting for an answer. He left them there, on the sidewalk, surrounded by curious stares. He walked to his car, got in, and sat still for a few seconds. He breathed fast, like he'd just finished a long run. He pulled out his phone again, opened the call history, and stared at her name at the top of the list. Then he deleted it. A simple gesture, but it carried the weight of a goodbye. He started the engine, adjusted the seat, and drove out of San Diego. The drive back was long and silent. He only stopped to refuel. The road became a continuous backdrop for what he'd just faced. He thought about every detail, every lie. When he reached Flagstaff, the sky was already dark. He parked the car, looked at the building where they'd lived together, and took a deep breath. He was ready to do what needed to be done. Lucas entered the apartment quietly. There was nothing to think over, plan, or rationalize. He'd known exactly what to do since the moment he turned his back on Madison and Scott on that San Diego sidewalk. He walked to the bedroom, pulled her suitcase from the closet, and started filling it. First the clothes, then the shoes and accessories, all thrown in without emotional order. He went to the bathroom, grabbed her toiletry bag, toothbrush, the products that took up half the shelf. In the end, he added some documents and dumped everything into a box. He stood up, dragged the suitcase to the door, and left it in the hallway with the box. He wanted her to know immediately she was no longer welcome. Then he picked up his phone and typed a short, direct message, "Your stuff is in the hallway. When you know where you'll be staying, let me know. I'll send the rest." He sent it, blocked the number, and deleted the contact. He went to the computer, updated all passwords for their digital accounts, company systems, social media, bank, streaming. Madison had used all of those as if they were part of the same life. Now, they belonged to one person again. He printed a list of financial matters that still needed to be settled, opened an email, and sent it to the lawyer who'd helped him before, requesting the start of asset division proceedings. The reply came in under an hour, asking for a few documents. Lucas scanned everything and sent it that same night. The next morning, early, he went to the building management. He said Madison wouldn't be living there anymore and asked to be notified if there was any unusual activity. He didn't try to block her from entering. He knew that could only happen legally. He just asked to be informed if she showed up. He returned to the apartment and called a locksmith. He changed the lock himself. He wanted his space to feel secure, and the act was symbolic. When she came back, she'd find a door that no longer opened the same way. He organized the finances. Canceled the joint credit cards, transferred ownership of the car that was under both their names, gathered receipts for future meetings with the lawyer. In just a few hours, the life they'd built together had already broken apart into practical, final actions. That afternoon, he got a new message. It was from an unknown number. The text read, "You can send my things to this address. Madison." It included a street name in Phoenix and an apartment number. Lucas took a deep breath, went to the shipping company's website, scheduled a pickup, and printed the label. He stuck it on the suitcase and the box and left everything ready in the hallway. Meanwhile, the apartment felt quieter than ever. But it was a different kind of silence. It carried absence, yes, but also the reclaiming of his own story. It was the end of what they once called home. But the beginning of something that, this time, depended only on him. In the days that followed, Madison didn't try to call or show up at the building. The shipping company came, picked up the suitcase and box, and the delivery confirmation showed up in Lucas's email before sunset. That simple confirmation felt like the final period at the end of a sentence that had gone on too long. The lawyer continued with the process. The assets were divided without arguments. Madison didn't contest anything. She seemed determined to accept everything as it was. No attempt at reconciliation. No words asking for forgiveness. She simply disappeared from Lucas's life like someone turning off the light in an empty room. Meanwhile, Lucas restructured his routine. He returned to work with renewed focus. He started going to climbing training more often and reconnected with old friends. Some already knew about the separation. Others asked quietly. He answered with the basics, no details. He just said they were in different phases. Over time, the questions faded, and he started being seen the way he used to be, even though inside he carried a different version of himself. One that had learned, in the hardest way possible, to respect his own boundaries. One afternoon, while going through emails, he got a notification with Scott Whitaker's name. It was an automatic LinkedIn update. Scott had been let go from the marketing firm he worked at, weeks after the affair became known internally. Someone from Lucas's team, who had mutual contacts, had sent an anonymous tip. The company opened an internal investigation and found he'd violated contract terms by getting romantically involved with the client's account manager. Madison was also removed from the project, but her name wasn't exposed. She left citing personal reasons and never spoke about the incident in professional circles again. She was seen in Phoenix by a mutual friend, working at a small startup. She was renting a modest apartment, and according to comments, seemed more withdrawn. That confident, outgoing image had been replaced by a woman who now kept her head down at industry events. Her social circle shrank. Invitations stopped. Opportunities dried up. Her name, once respected in meetings and presentations, was now linked to the quiet scandal she'd caused. Lucas, on the other hand, kept moving forward. He didn't go around telling his story. He kept it as a private lesson. But he turned it into a standard. He learned to listen to his discomfort, to respect the warning signs, and to never ignore his own limits to hold on to something that had stopped being mutual. A year later, he moved to Bend, Oregon, where he opened a new climbing school. The town was smaller, quieter, with trails that seemed made for fresh starts. There, he rebuilt a simple but free life. One night, while preparing materials for a new class, he received an unexpected email. The subject line read only, "I'm sorry." The sender's address was familiar. It was Madison. The message had just a few lines. She said she only now understood the damage she'd caused. That she hoped, one day, she could be remembered without bitterness. And that she wished he'd found peace. Lucas read it, took a deep breath, and closed his laptop. He didn't reply. The answer had already been given in the silence she created when she made her choice. And in that moment, without resentment or longing, he realized he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Because when someone betrays another, they almost always betray themselves first. And the greatest justice is the one that happens in silence. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.